the thing they feared.
Paris, 1843. The air hung heavy with soot and smoke, the scent of iron and rain threading through the cracked windows of Lucien Moreau's study. Outside, the gas lamps flickered against the fog-drenched cobblestones, their orange halos casting trembling shadows on the crumbling stonework of Rue de la Paix. Inside, silence reigned, but not peace. Lucien stood alone at the long oak table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, blood under his fingernails, candlelight trembling against the curve of surgical steel. Before him, a partially dissected wolf, its body splayed like an offering. The beast's heart still steamed faintly in the cold, as if even death could not banish its fury. He wasn't sure why he'd taken this one. It wasn't the anatomy he sought. It was something deeper, something primal, something that had stared back at him in dreams ever since they had gone cold. Across the room, a clock ticked with mechanical indifference. His wife's portrait, serene, distant, watched him from the mantel. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. He recorded something in his journal, quill scratching angrily. Man speaks of time as healer, but it is no such thing. Time does not mend, it merely buries. Had I started these studies months earlier, perhaps? No more ifs. Ifs are lies told by cowards to dress regret in false nobility. He let the quill fall. His eyes burned, not from tears, but from the torment of clarity too late. The kind of clarity that gnaws at the soul like a rat in the walls. Lucien turned to the shelf where leather-bound tomes leaned like old drunkards, medical texts, ancient manuscripts, and now, more frequently, heretical philosophy and forbidden science, alchemy, thaumaturgy, transmutation, things his colleagues scoffed at, and he once did too. Before his wife coughed blood into white linens, before his daughter called for him with a cracked voice, and he did not come. He remembered the opera that night, the lecture, the wine. He remembered the mask of professionalism he wore while speaking of decay and rebirth. While at home, the real rot began. He reached for his notebook, flipping to the page with his latest sketch, a diagram of the soul as a waveform, not a metaphysical entity, but an energetic resonance, something that might, just might, linger. If thought is energy, he whispered, then memory is residue. And if memory was residue, perhaps it could be summoned. That's what it had become now. Not medicine, not science, but atonement through intellect. A resurrection of purpose where there was no longer family to save. As the fire guttered in the hearth, Lucien leaned over the wolf's open chest and spoke. The ancients called your kind cursed, but what if they were wrong? What if you are not a punishment, but a doorway, something older, purer, a mirror, not a monster? He didn't notice the wind. He didn't hear the door creak, though it had been bolted, but something shifted in the room, as though the air itself had inhaled. He turned sharply. Nothing, just the flicker of the candlelight, dancing like laughter. In the distance, the cathedral bells of Saint-Eustache rang out midnight. 12 tolls, each one a reminder. Another day gone, another truth delayed. Lucien sat, and as he stared into the flames, he whispered not to God, but to her. I was brilliant too late, my love. I sought truth, when I should have sought time, and now I would break the veil itself if it meant seeing your face again. And somewhere, in the darkness beyond the city, something heard him. The snow fell in soft, soundless sheets across Paris, coating the iron gates and rooftops in spectral white. It made the city look pure again, a lie whispered by winter. Inside his laboratory, Lucien Moreau had not moved in hours. The wolf's corpse was gone, burned in the furnace. He'd told himself it was for sanitation, but really, it was to silence the growling voice that had begun to wake in his mind. Instead, Lucien stood before a mirror, not looking at his reflection, but through it. One hand rested on a book, the other trembled slightly as he turned a page. "If the soul is energy," he wrote, "then memory is the echo of its movement. Resurrection is not reanimation, it is recall." He believed this now, had to. If memory could be summoned, preserved, revived, then so could they. The whisper of philosophy. That night, he lit no candles, yet the room was not dark. Something about the cold air shimmered as he pored over glyphs and diagrams. A voice, or was it thought, formed behind his eyes. "You seek to bring them back, but for whom? For them, or for yourself?" Lucien paused. His quill hovered above parchment. He did not answer, yet it replied anyway. "Would they even recognize you now? You, who seeks meaning only after loss. You, who ignored time when it was still yours to hold." He gritted his teeth. "Regret is a compass," he muttered aloud. "Better late than never." But the voice returned, now laced with sarcasm. "A noble lie, spoken like a man who thinks pain justifies anything." The descent. Lucien began to change his studies. He was no longer reading to learn, he was reading to validate, to gather proof, not for truth, but for permission. This is where the descent began, not with madness, but with certainty. He isolated diagrams of vibrational soul echoes, convinced that if he could stabilize the resonance of a lost mind, he could retrieve it. "Not resurrection," he said. "Recollection. We are what we remember." And yet, each time he reached for that memory, his wife's smile, his child's voice, it was blurred, fractured. "Because you were not there, Lucien," the voice said. "You can't recall what you refused to witness." The choice. One night, pacing the stone floor, Lucien stopped before the Codex Lycanum, which now sat open, his pages warm to the touch. There it was, a rite, not to summon a soul, but to mirror it, to echo its pain through the body of the summoner. He ran his fingers along the page. The ink shimmered faintly. A door opens only to one who bears the echo of the dead. Lucien knew then this was no longer science. It was belief. He whispered, "I will carry their memory, even if it destroys me." And somewhere in the shadows of the room, behind shelves, beneath the floorboards, perhaps beneath the city, something ancient heard him. The one who sees. Across the city, in the crypt below Montparnasse, a pair of pale, amber eyes opened within the bones of forgotten kings. No breath, no body, just vision and awareness. The seal had cracked. "Another fool calls to the dead," it whispered. And once more, the gate trembles. End of chapter. Reflection. He did not fall because he sought the impossible. He fell because he could not accept that some things are meant to remain broken. The past is not a door, it is a weight, and if you wear it long enough, you forget you are drowning. The snow had not stopped falling. It drifted like ash outside Lucien's tall windows, settling on the iron balconies and the shoulders of forgotten statues. Paris remained quiet, suffocated beneath winter's indifference. Inside the fire crackled low, throwing golden veins of light across the cluttered floor. Diagrams, ritual pages, sketches of wolves, human spines, soul echo frequencies, all blurred into a tapestry of obsession. Lucien Moreau stood hunched at his desk, lips moving in silent recitation of the Codex. And then a knock, 3 soft raps at the door. He blinked. Reality returned like a slap of cold air. He opened the door with reluctance, his candle casting a faint halo around the visitor. "Lucien," she said gently. Her name was Elise Varnier, his wife's younger sister, strong, upright posture, auburn hair tied back, a face aged not by years but by loss. She had the same eyes as her sister, though now dimmed with caution. "Elise," Lucien muttered. "It's late." "I know. I waited for the snow to calm. It didn't." She stepped inside without waiting. "I had to see you." A conversation in the half-light. She walked slowly through the room, eyes passing over torn pages, ink stains, melted wax. The scent of burnt herbs still lingered in the air. "You've buried yourself in this place," she said. "I've buried myself in truth," Lucien replied. "Or what's left of it." Elise looked toward the desk, the open codex, the trembling flame. "This isn't truth, Lucien. It's a grave you keep digging, hoping it leads to a door." He turned, face tired, but his voice sharp. "I could have saved them, had I turned my brilliance inward sooner, not toward society's applause, not toward the minds of strangers, but to them. Maybe they'd still breathe." She didn't flinch. "You're right," she said softly. "Maybe you could have. And I carry that thought too. Every night. Every dream." He lowered his gaze. "But here's what I also know," Elise continued. "Grief is not a proof of love. Living well is. Carrying forward their light is." Lucien's jaw tensed. "You speak of healing as if it is a duty. I speak of resurrection because it is justice." "No," she said, "it is punishment." She approached him, close now. "I miss them too, but we must not trap ourselves in memory like amber. Preserved, unchanging, dead." Her hand hovered near his. "Lucien, we still have years left. We still are. We do not need to die, because another did." He looked at her. For the first time in months, his shoulders dropped. "Why do you still care what happens to me?" he asked. "Because," she whispered, "you are the only piece of her I have left." A fleeting calm. They sat for a while in silence. No rituals, no arguments. Just warmth and the fragile possibility of something human. As she stood to leave, Elise turned at the door. "I'll call on you again. Don't vanish completely, Lucien. You may think you're alone, but you're not the only one still bleeding." And with that, she disappeared into the snow. The Codex stirs. The moment the door shut, the warmth bled from the room. The candles dimmed. From the desk, The Codex Lycanum rustled as if caught in windless breath. Its pages shimmered faintly, the ink shifting, symbols rearranging themselves into something new. Lucien's eyes locked on the centre of the page. A sigil had appeared, one he had never seen before. His pulse quickened, and somewhere, in the deepest chamber of the city's bones, a heartbeat answered his. End of chapter reflection. Some doors are only visible when you're about to walk through the wrong one, and some warnings sound too much like forgiveness to be taken seriously. She offered him the future, but the past had claws. The storm outside had deepened. Snow battered the windows like skeletal fingers, and wind hissed down the chimney like a serpent returning home. Lucien did not notice. He hadn't noticed nightfall, or the cold. The Codex Lycanum lay open on the floor, surrounded by half-burned candles, powdered bone, wolf blood, and herbs that had no name in French. He sat cross-legged before it, shirt open, ritual ink dried in black trails down his arms and chest. The symbols on the page had begun to shift on their own, not move, but breathe, as if they had never been ink, but flesh. The whisper that wasn't. He felt it before he understood it. A pressure, like a presence, coiling around his rib cage. Not sound, not word, just knowing. His breathing slowed, his eyes glazed. His body remained in the room, but his mind did not. He saw a forest, long dead, now buried under cities, a firelit cave, a man naked and kneeling, claws torn from his own fingers, hair like blackened steel, a face both beast and man, and eyes, those eyes, like burning amber, not just seeing the world, but remembering all of it. Dimitri. Lucien had never heard the name, but it carved itself into him like a scar. The thought was not spoken, but planted. He was the wolf, the first to shed man's shame and embrace the hunger beneath the skin. He gave himself to the god of the wild, Lysano, and was granted shape, power, memory. But memory is dangerous, so that they erased him. They turned the first gift into myth, so none would follow. Lucien jolted upright. The room was suddenly very quiet. He looked down. His chest bore a faint glowing symbol, the one from the Codex page. He had drawn nothing, and yet there it was, inkless and burned into his skin. The choice again. He stood slowly, blood rushing in his ears. The Codex still lay open, the sigil pulsing faintly. Dimitri, he whispered aloud. The name tasted old, bitter, forbidden. If this was true, then he was not the first, but he might become the first reborn, the first in this age, the only one with the knowledge, the hunger, the will. He did not recoil. He placed both hands on the Codex and began to chant, not in Latin, not in French, but in the language of the dead, the one he had never learned, and somehow now knew. End of chapter reflection. The past is not lost. It is buried, but beware what you unearth, for the bones of gods do not sleep like men. Dimitri was not erased. He was sealed, and Lucien, fool or fate, just broke the lock. The candles had long burned out. Only the faint blue light of dawn crept through the broken window panes, pooling like milk on the floor. Lucien sat in the middle of it, unmoving, ash clinging to his skin, the Codex opened before him, silent now, but still pulsing with unseen breath. His face was gaunt, his hands blackened by ink and blood, and still he whispered, "If I had found this sooner, if I had known, maybe I could have saved them." The words were bitter, not grief, not any more, but blame. This power was hidden, erased, stolen from men like me. But I have found it. I have earned it. He stood trembling, stared at the strange glowing symbol, now etched into his chest like a second heart. Maybe it's not too late. The abandonment of reason. He lit no fire, ate no food, slept not at all. Instead, he offered everything. Blood from his hand, hair from his head, bone from a jar labelled with his wife's name. He burned it in a shallow basin. He chanted. He knelt. He wept, not with sorrow, but hunger. "Let the gods of beasts hear me," he hissed. "I will pay. I will trade. I will break. Bring me the power to return what was taken, or to take it back myself." The room darkened. Even the light outside dimmed. The Codex flipped its own page. Slow, deliberate. The air grew dense. The symbols glowed. And in that moment, he felt something enter him. Not like possession, not like madness. Clarity. The will of Lycanum. No voice, no figure, no thunder. Just understanding, pure and primal. The will of Lycanum, the god of wild things, of shifting flesh and endless hunger, passed through him like a silent judgment. It did not ask his name. It did not ask his reason. It did not offer mercy. It marked him. Lucien gasped, fell to his knees. The room pulsed once, then went still, and suddenly the world was different. The change begins. His heartbeat was louder now, his hearing sharper. The sound of the city breathing, the flapping of wings miles away, became audible. His fingertips tingled, his spine ached. He saw heat rising off the floor, and worst of all, he liked it. He walked to the mirror, and the man who looked back at him was still Lucien, but not only Lucien. "This is what it means to be free," he whispered, "to no longer be bound by the rules of the dead. I will become the key. I will not ask the world for answers. I will take them." He turned his gaze skyward. The moon would rise in 2 nights. He would wait, and then he would no longer wonder what might have been. He would become. End of chapter reflection. There is a moment when a man stops seeking truth and begins seeking victory. Lucien did not fall to grief. He fell to certainty. And the gods, old and wild, do not grant power freely. They give it to those who are already cursed. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He did not blink. Lucien sat in stillness for nearly 2 days, his bones aching, his eyes fixed on the fading light outside the high windows. The city moved beyond the glass, unaware, unready. The moon would rise tonight. The waiting. The first night passed in tremors, not of fear, but of becoming. His skin crawled, his blood thickened. By day, he could barely breathe. His muscles spasmed in unnatural rhythms. He saw halos around people in the street, their pulses like music, their warmth like perfume. He smiled. "Soon," he whispered. "Soon I will become the door." The transformation. And then the night came. The moon rose, full and white, a patient executioner. The light touched him. And he broke. It began in the chest, a twisting, cracking expansion, ribs widening, snapping. He fell to the floor, screaming not with voice, but with soul. Flesh rippled, bubbled, then split. His fingers elongated, twisted. Claws punched through skin. His jaw unhinged. His teeth shattered and regrew. He vomited blood. His spine arched, then snapped into something ancient. Eyes rolled back, then forward again, but they were no longer his. And when it was done, he stood taller, broader, covered in thick black hair, slick with blood and heat. He was man no more. The night of the beast. The moon was a silver wound in the sky, and from that wound, Lucien was born again. He did not ease into the world. He erupted into it. Through shattered glass and splintered rooftops, he leapt, a black blur of muscle and madness. He no longer saw names, faces, people, only shapes, heat, targets. The first kill. The butcher was closing his store when the creature landed behind him. He turned, confused by the growl, a blur, a claw. His head separated before his mind had time to register fear. Blood sprayed across the butcher's block, soaking sausages and salted meat with fresh warmth. The second. A woman, late 30s, a sinner at a nearby cabaret, was humming to herself on Rue Saint-Martin. She looked up as the wind shifted. The hairs on her neck rose. She wasn't alone. She whispered, "Mon Dieu," just before he lunged from the shadows. Her scream never made it past the first breath. Her body hit the ground in 2 pieces. The third. 3 gendarmes formed a search line after the second body was found. They carried torches and blades. They shouted orders into the alleys. Then one of them looked up and saw 2 glowing eyes on the rooftop. The torch hit the ground. The scream came next. Then the blood rained down. The second officer tried to run. Too slow. The third, he simply froze, whispering Hail Marys as claws slid across his chest like a violinist tuning his final note. The streets burn. By midnight, the entire arrondissement was in chaos. Bells rang, dogs barked, children cried, doors slammed shut. The city's smell changed, no longer perfume and ash, but fear and iron. Men with rifles gathered, but none fired in time. The beast did not run. He danced through the streets, his silhouette flashing between flickering torches and collapsing wagons. A man on horseback tried to strike him. The beast dragged both horse and rider into an alley. Only bones were found by dawn. The cathedral. Even the sacred was not spared. At Saint-Jacques, a priest tried to ring the bells to warn others. The bell never rang. They found his body twisted around the rope like a discarded doll, the cross clutched in his hand, broken in half, its end embedded in his own throat. The moment of awareness. On the Rue du Silence, ironically named, he stood in the center of the street, blood dripping from his claws, steam rising off his back. In a window above, a boy stared. Too young to run, too old not to understand. Lucien stared back, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Memory, guilt, recognition. Then he vanished into the mist. Final kill. The last death came just before dawn. A woman fled through the cemetery, tripping over broken gravestones. She begged, She screamed. Please, please, I have children. The beast hesitated. Then he looked up at the moon and ripped her open anyway, because this wasn't about justice. This wasn't about saving anyone. This was hunger. This was truth. This was Lucien unchained. The return. Just before dawn, he crept through the mist like a forgotten ghost, his body already changing, the fur receding, the claws shrinking, the bones snapping back. He bled as he walked. Every movement was agony, not from pain, from awareness. He remembered every face, every scream. He reached his home. The window was open, and waiting inside, wrapped in her coat, stood Elise. She turned and froze.
You were meant to protect them, not become the thing they feared.
Half beast, half brother. Lucien crawled through the window, half man, half beast. Clawed hands gripped the stone. His face was still twisted, fur down the jawline, eyes still glowing. He growled. Instinct told him to kill her. She did not run. Elise, he choked out. Leave. But she did not move, her eyes locked on his. Is this what you've become? He shook, like something burning beneath the skin. I had to. If I had this before, I could have saved them. She stepped closer. Lucien, look at me. I am looking, and all I see are lies. People speaking of peace while death takes from us. I chose power because reason failed me. Tears lined her eyes, not from fear, but recognition. You didn't choose power, Lucien. You chose escape. You couldn't face loss, so you buried yourself in hunger. He dropped to his knees, panting. I wanted to bring them back. Instead, I became what took them. She knelt beside him, then stopped before it takes what's left. He looked down at his hands, still clawed, still not his. I thought I could remake the world, he whispered. No, she said. You tried to cheat death and found only destruction. That is not what it means to be a man. A man faces what is. He shapes the world not with blood, but with truth. Lucien trembled, not from the beast, but from the return of self, and as the first light of morning broke over the Paris skyline, he wept. End of chapter. Reflection. Power means nothing when severed from purpose, and purpose means nothing when born from fear. Lucien became the beast not because he was cursed, but because he stopped believing he could live without what was lost. He tried to cheat fate and became the reason others would need to. The sun had returned, not warm, not forgiving, just present, pouring through the tall windows like judgment. The fire in the hearth had long since died. The blood on the floor had dried. The candles were melted down to stubs. Puddles of wax hardened into ugly shapes. Lucien sat in his chair. His skin was bare now, pale and human once more. The black hair was gone. The claws vanished. Only his eyes remained different. Too quiet, too hollow. Across from him, in the same seat she'd always taken during visits, sat Elise Varnier. She wore a heavy coat, her gloves still on. She hadn't touched the tea she'd made. She stared at him for a long time before speaking. You killed them, she said softly. All those people. Last night. That was you. Lucien said nothing. I heard the bells. I saw the smoke. I walked through the Rue Saint-Martin this morning. There were marks. Things no animal could have done. You left pieces of people behind like they were broken dolls. Still, he said nothing, but his fingers trembled slightly, hidden in his lap. The possibility of becoming... Elise leaned forward. I don't know if I came to hate you, or to save you. Maybe both. But I came because we both lost her, and we both lost your daughter. Lucien finally looked at her. Just barely. Just long enough. You don't get to decide who pays for that, she whispered. Neither do I. But we had a chance, Lucien. He blinked, and she pressed on. We could have started something, not to replace them, never that, but to rebuild something that honors them. A new chapter. Two broken people, learning how to live again. You think coming that thing last night made you strong? It made you a weapon with no aim, a fire without purpose. She rose and walked to the dusty mirror near the doorway. There's a difference between grief and identity. You let your loss define you, instead of refine you. She turned back, eyes sharp now. You had a mind like no other, a heart that once loved deeply, and you traded it for claws. Not because you were cursed, but because you were afraid to feel human again. Lucien finally spoke, voice cracked, and nearly a whisper. It's too late. She tilted her head. Not cruelly, just firmly. Only if you keep deciding it is. The best version of yourself isn't behind you. It's still possible, even now, but not if you keep worshipping your pain like it's a god. They stood in silence for a long while. Eventually, Elise turned toward the door, her coat rustling as she moved. I'll leave you to consider what's left, whether it's ashes and blood, or soil, something that can still grow. She hesitated at the doorway. I will not wait forever, but I will come again, if you give me a reason to. Then she was gone. Lucien sat still in the quiet. The blood was gone from his hands, but the weight of it remained. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since the Codex had opened, he didn't reach for it. End of chapter reflection. Grief must be carried, but it must not become your compass. Pain may write the first chapter of your story, but you are the one who decides how it ends. Power without direction is destruction, but brokenness with will, that is where healing begins. The snow had returned, soft, soundless, as if the sky mourned without knowing why. Lucien stood alone in his laboratory, clean now. The blood had been scrubbed from the stone. The Codex was shut, wrapped in chains. The mirror was uncovered. He stared at himself. Not the man, not the beast. Just what remained. He had not spoken in days. He had not needed to. The thoughts that formed in his mind were no longer his alone. You asked to see beyond the veil. You asked for power, for memory, for the chance to change fate. Lucien nodded slowly, his reflection tilting back in silent agreement. I granted it, not as punishment, but as agreement. You bargained. I delivered. Everything has a price. He closed his eyes. He remembered Elise's words, the warmth of her voice, the ache in her hands. He remembered what she had offered, a chance to begin again, to rebuild something not in spite of the pain, but with it. There is still a life for me, he said aloud, with her, with meaning. I could try again. Too late. The voice returned, not cruel, but cold. The moment of choice has passed. The thread has been pulled. Now there are only two paths. Lucien saw them, felt them. One, the beast. To continue, to surrender wholly to the thing inside, to hunt, to feed, to become child of the wild god. No more guilt, no more doubt, only instinct, pure, eternal. But Elise would never look at him again. He would never hold her hand, never laugh, never rest, only hunger. 2. The end. To stop, to end it here, before the next full moon, before he became something unrecognizable, before he heard another soul. The price, paid in full. Freedom, not through victory, but through choice. Lucien opened his eyes. They were wet. Then I know what must be done. He walked across the room. The drawer opened with a slow, familiar creak. The revolver, old, elegant, heavy, rested atop a folded piece of cloth. He sat down, placed the weapon on his lap, and took a breath. "This is not the man I wanted to be," he said aloud. "This was never the way to save them. I tried to conquer death, but in doing so, I fed it. Let this be the last blood I spill." He raised the revolver. The snow outside fell harder. And then, silence. The next morning, Elise came as she promised. Her footsteps echoed through the empty street. The birds had returned to the rooftops. The city was calm, almost cleansed. She found the front door slightly ajar. "Lucien?" she called softly. No answer. She stepped inside. The fire was out. The room was still, and there, in his chair, sat Lucien, pale, still, eyes closed, revolver fallen from his hand, face peaceful. At last, she dropped to her knees, not in panic, not in shock, but in grief and understanding. She wept, not just for him, but for what he could have been. Final reflection. There are moments in every life when a single decision will define everything after. Lucien believed power would redeem him, that strength could erase regret. But power without truth is a mask worn over rot. To sell your soul is the easiest thing in the world. It's what you do with the price you get for it that's the hard part. Rand, Lucien paid with his soul, but in the end, he chose the one thing the beast could never understand: responsibility, and in that, he became a man again.